Greenland is part of Denmark. If Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are going to take Greenland somehow, which they keep insisting, the most obvious route to doing that would be a war with Denmark, I guess, which is part of NATO and is ostensibly our ally both individually and as part of NATO. But to that point, our alliance with them, I want you to watch this. This is a man named Rufus Gifford. He was chief of protocol in the Biden administration. He was also America's ambassador to Denmark under President Obama. And I just want you to watch his reaction to what Trump and Vance are doing here with this stunt, with this threat, which they are now escalating. Watch.
Hi, y'all. Okay, so to say I'm a bit worked up this morning is an understatement, and that's because of this. Yesterday, the Vice President of the United States goes on Fox News and says that Denmark is not a very good ally. Now, I know that a lot of people would know how I feel about this, but I want to tell you why. And it is in part because, yes, I was the one for a number of years that would go to the prime minister or the foreign minister or the defense minister and ask on behalf of the United States government for them to send their young men and women to Iraq to fight ISIS, to help go remove chemical weapons from Syria, to go fight Ebola in Africa. I did it every time, and every single time they said yes, and they said yes without hesitation. And in part because it was the United States of America, a great ally, asking them to do it. And for them to hear today that now the Vice President of the United States is saying that they are not a good ally when they have lost more people per capita, young men and women, in Afghanistan than any country other than the United States of America, it is just shameful. I have been to these funerals. I've heard stories of young men who've had their legs blown off by IEDs in Afghanistan, of young men who've had to go through numerous surgeries and now live in constant pain because of something that happened to them on the battlefield. For them and their families to now hear the vice president talk like this is just heartbreaking. And honestly, like Americans, we have to show outrage to our European partners. This is shameful, and this is a moral shortcoming. And honestly, look, we understand that the reason he's saying it is because they are not bending the knee to Trump's authoritarian, imperialistic takeover of Greenland. We get that. But at some point, this is about something so much bigger. This is about the men and women. I hope that J.D. Vance could say this not just to the face of Maria Bartiromo, but go to Denmark and say that to the face of the parents of the young men and women who've lost their lives alongside U.S. troops. Say it to them. And then you will have just an ounce of courage. But until then, it is just shameful. And look, Americans, we need to show a little outrage here. Our partners and allies expect it from us, and they deserve better.
Joining us now is Rufus Gifford. He's America's former ambassador to Denmark. Ambassador Gifford, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you don't mind that we stole that from what you posted online. I thought a lot more people needed to see it.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. It's important to hear, and very few people have had the perspective that I've had, and have had the honor and privilege of serving the United States, of having been to Greenland for 9 times, of understanding the political complexity of the Arctic and the relationship between Denmark and Greenland, and how important the United States is to the people both of Denmark and Greenland. So it is heartbreaking to me, and I so appreciate you inviting me on here today to talk a little bit about it.
Well, I feel like a lot of our discussion about this crazy scenario we find ourselves in has been about the how Trump's fixation on Greenland, where did it come from? Where did he get this idea? How non-viable this idea seems, how any potential path toward him getting what he wants seems like it would be impossible for him to get, the catastrophic consequences of a potential war with Denmark, with a NATO ally, if that's what he felt like he needed to do, and that is indeed what he's threatened to get it. But I feel like what we haven't talked about is what these threats from him have already done to our alliances, to our standing in the world, and to what we are able to accomplish in the world as the United States of America. And I feel like you're really the first person who I've heard talk about that in really granular terms, in terms of what damage has already been done. Do you think that's sort of that's the more appropriate ground for the national conversation we're having about this?
I so love this conversation because I think it's what matters. American diplomacy, the reason why American diplomacy has been so meaningful over the course of the last 80 years is because of the human relationships that we have built across nations. The soft power that the United States has exhibited over the course of that time we have built friendships and loyalty, the likes of which we've never seen before on the world stage. And what breaks my heart in this, Rachel, is after that video that you posted, which I obviously somewhat spontaneously recorded after the Vance comments, are the messages that I've received from Europeans, and not just Danes, because the video did go viral. And the messages you receive back are so sad, because these are countries that absolutely love the United States at our core. That because we have been there for them and they have been there for us. And now this is the thing, we're not just losing the governments. And that's what I want Americans to know. We're not just losing the prime ministers. We're not just losing the defense ministers. There's lots of talk about that. The problem is we're losing the trust and respect of the people on the ground, the soldiers who sacrificed proudly alongside young American men and women fighting wars that we asked them to fight. And when they are disrespected, when their countries are disrespected, those real men and women, they feel disrespected personally as well. And that's been my experience over the course of the last 2 months. And I speak out, Rachel, because I think our European partners, as I said in the video, deserve better. But they also have to hear Americans speak out. Meaning they have to hear Americans remind the world that we still respect their sacrifice and partnerships. And that's why I do it. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to have this conversation, because it is so much more than just the granular actions, which I think you led into this conversation so beautifully, because I agree with every word of it. But we don't talk enough about the human cost, which is happening day after day after day.
As an ambassador and in the kind of diplomatic roles that you've played, you've seen America try to persuade people to do things with us that they might not otherwise want to do. You've seen us try to dissuade countries from doing things that they did want to do, which we felt weren't in our interest. And you've seen all the different ways that America, uses its power, all of its various forms of power to try to get what we want in the world. We are now, just this week, facing a world in which Canada says that we are no longer a valued and trusted trading partner, in which Europe says not only are we no longer a partner in defense, but they so distrust us that they may want to divest themselves of U.S. weapons systems because they're not sure that they can safely count on even U.S. weapons with the U.S. government that is so hostile to European interests. They may need to build up European defenses in a way that has never been contemplated since the end of World War II, specifically to treat America essentially as an adversary, not just as the absence of an ally. In a world where we stand alone, or where we stand, I guess, with Russia and El Salvador, and that's the extent of our alliances in the world, what are the kinds of things that Americans have counted on us being able to do that we will no longer be able to do?
Gosh, the answer to that question, there are so many intangible parts of this, right? One of the things that I have learned over the course of my ambassadorship was just how many students studied in the United States. I think their parents are going to think twice about that right now. How many folks literally would fly to New York and in the summer and drive to Los Angeles and experience something more about the United States than I've even experienced. They loved us. They still had a great fondness for American leadership dating back to the Marshall Plan and World War II. They carry that with them. And to see it unravel, just those cultural connections, those little things. You mentioned the economic piece. I actually do think it's important. You know, we spent billions, U.S. companies, billions and billions of dollars of defense contracts. I helped sell to Denmark the F-35 fighter jets. I can tell you the person who is the chief negotiator of that, one of the chief negotiators of that F-35 contract is looking actively right now about getting out of that F-35 contract simply because they are afraid that Donald Trump will hold those military resources hostage if he doesn't get what he wants. And again, that will harm everybody. That will harm an American taxpayer. But again, I believe that the fraying of the human relationship and human trust is something you just can't overstate right now. It is a very, very important part of this. Americans just simply will be viewed with a degree of skepticism that we have not been viewed with in Europe for the last 80 years. And that's why we have to have this conversation. More Americans need to speak out with clarity and remind the rest of the world that there's still a heck of a lot of us that believe these values, these extraordinary values that have kept the world peaceful and prosperous for the last 80 years. A lot of us still hold them very, very close to our hearts, and I am certainly one of those.
Yeah. The American people haven't necessarily changed our minds here. It's just that our government is going through a revolution. Rufus Gifford, former ambassador to Denmark, I really appreciate you making time to be here tonight, sir. Thank you.
So grateful to you, Rachel. Thank you.